Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily here, and I am joined by someone who I believe needs little introduction to a lot of our followers and viewers, who's Brian Yunza. He's the writer, director, producer of so many genre films we know and love, including Re-Animator, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary, alongside Bride of Re-Animator, Society, Necronomicon, Return of the Living Dead 3, multiple Silent Night, Deadly Night sequels. So, Brian, really excited to have you with me today.
Nice to be here.
Well, I know I don't have all the time in the world, so I'm going to get right into some questions for you. The first one is regarding Reanimator, which, as I mentioned, is celebrating its 40th anniversary. Easily one of the most well-known genre films out there, I'd say. But I'm curious to know, from your perspective, what you think explains some of the long-lasting success and relevance that Reanimator's had over the years.
Well, I think there's something really, I think it's just a story well told by Stuart Gordon. I think he really is able to keep the actors on a level track, and it's very clear what's going on at all times. I
Yeah.
just coincidentally just watched it again last Wednesday night in Alhambra. Um, because they're this week, and I think this week and next, the Regal theaters and the cinema
Yep.
chain are releasing the 4K projection theatrically in about, I don't know, 250 screens. Now, it's not like they're playing all day. I think, like where I went to see it, it was one screen one showing every evening. Um, but it was, and I went with a number of people who hadn't seen it before, and because they're not really horror fans.
Sure.
And I went because it was a birthday party, and and the projection of the 4K was really good, and I can really see that it makes a difference, especially the bigger you put it up. And the transfer was really, of course, I've seen the transfer and everything, in the in the post house, at the
Sure.
um, but it's different when you just go to a regular movie theater. That's what you're going to get. And it was interesting to see it with a bunch of people who weren't necessarily hardcore horror fans. If I watch it at special screenings and at festivals and cons and stuff, the people there are all dyed in the wool,
Yeah,
kind of, you know,
they're one of us.
head-banging horror fans. So you get it. You get that they have a lot of affection for this movie and movies like that. But it was amazing how well it worked. And I know that when I see it with somebody, I tend to see it through their eyes as much as my own. And one thing that really stuck out on me this time around was not only how in your face the movie was, and not only how it it just keeps upping the ante.
It does.
It starts kind of characterish, it kind of sets things up. But once we get to the cat scene, which is about 15 minutes in, and then that develops into Halsey dying and getting reanimated. And by that time, you're a third of the way, 40 minutes into the movie. And I think you're kind of going, just a minute, things are moving
Let me
right
catch my
along.
breath.
Yeah. And then from there, then then Hill gets his head cut off. And, it just keeps going crazier. So I think that is something we don't see a lot these days. I think I also noticed how bang, bang, the cuts, no wasted time in between scenes, no extra stuff in there. And I must say, a lot of that's kind of Lee Percy, the editor. was responsible for that. When Stuart did his cut right after we shot, he had to go back to Chicago while we were editing, and we would send him VHS tapes of the cut. His original cut was 2 hours and 15 minutes. The
Wow.
movie now is 74 minutes or 70, no, it's 86 minutes, 86 minutes. Now, that's a lot of time. No, we took out big scenes. So I wouldn't, it's not like today. Today, when you watch any movie, and certainly horror movies,
2 hours long.
there's just a lot of in-between stuff getting
Yeah.
there, atmosphere and camera work. And it's, you don't, but this is like bang and then bang and then bang. And of course, the in your face gore, the pre-Me Too um, sexuality
Yeah.
is kind of refreshing. Um, so I don't know, it's just a real good movie. It's still outrageous. Today where anything goes, you can see anything on streaming, just the most crazy, the most horrible, the most gory, the most sexual. But there's something about Re-Animator that I think it's fun. It's a fun horror movie, and it's just entertaining. It holds up. God knows why.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's such a propulsive film. It's like once it gets going, it really doesn't let you catch your breath. And you're right. I don't think they make very efficient horror films as much like that anymore, where they're a real tight 80 to 90 minutes. And they really jump you into the process sooner rather than later. And I also want to extend a congratulations that we just got the news today that Bride of Reanimator is getting a similar 4K treatment from the same team that did this one. And I know believe that was your second directorial film after Society. What does Bride of Reanimator mean to you, given that that was something that, again, following Stewart's footsteps, but working in close tandem with him on a sequel?
Well, it was certainly, it was very daunting. It was, it was really scary to worry about whether it was going to live up to anything or even be like Reanimator. But I did have Jeffrey and Bruce, you know, and certainly all the effects guys that worked on it knew the
Oh
movie.
yeah.
There was a lot of people. This was not so long after the original, so that people knew what we were doing, kind of. Um, it was important to me to try to do a sequel that kind of didn't kind of become a huge disappointment. I mean, it's not as good as the first one, and you can't. I think you always it's not as well crafted in terms of directing, but and of course always you have to say the original always you have to get like when people say Bride of Frankenstein's better than Frankenstein. Maybe on a lot of technical ways it is, but you can't underestimate or undervalue the original. What kind of creates something. Now you
Right.
can make it more extensive and bigger budget. You can do all those sorts of things, and I think I don't think anyone would say that Bride of Reanimator is a better movie than Re-Animator, the way Bride of Frankenstein is said to. But it does, similar to Bride of Frankenstein, it just gets more and more crap,
Yeah,
more
it
and more
does.
stuff.
And don't
And
sell
I,
yourself short either, because Bride of Reanimator is a really fun film. As much as the original Reanimator kind of places a mark, Bride of Reanimator does what a great sequel should do, which is it ups the ante in almost every single way. And you've done that, with Return of the Living Dead 3, even, you kind of took that from the story of the sequel to Return of the Living Dead is almost a documentary of itself and how it was going to be the Larimar company picked that up to make it almost a kid friendly. Then you come in with Return of the Living Dead 3 and make this kind of very hard horror movie. So I wouldn't sell yourself too short
Well,
on
I would say that Return of the Living Dead 3, I think, is a better movie than Bride of Reanimator just in the fact that it's just much better crafted. The Bride of Reanimator there's acting that's dicey, the story kind of gets a little lost sometimes. There's a lot going on. It's not so, you know, kind of organic.
Sure.
Um, but I think Return of the Living Dead 3, I think is. I think it's much more, and I don't, I must say I don't hardly consider it a sequel, you know,
I could see
because,
that.
well, it's because it was I felt like I really wanted to do that movie. Um, and I really wanted to do it because I love Return of the Living Dead. I actually visited the set of that movie, one of the earliest sets that I visited when I came out to LA. And I I just thought it was a great movie. It was the movie that showed everybody, especially Joel Silver, how to make a EC Comics horror comic into a movie and not do it like Creepshow, where they say, well, we're going to have pages of a comic book and, make it look like those comics. Instead, it said, no, we're having brain eating and, people killing each other. And it was just purely fun, just really great. But then the thing about Return of Living Dead was it was like the alternate sequel to the horror movie that was the beginning of the modern age of horror in my book, which is Night of the Living Dead.
Yep.
And I feel like Night of the Living Dead, if you want a marker, it kind of all changed, it turned a corner at that point. And it was really something. And certainly Dawn of the Dead started having a little of the ironic humor that Return of the Living Dead had in like 100 times more. But in general, the Living Dead movies that George Romero made kind of ended up um, not being so much fun as being kind of like we're making serious social commentary here, except for Tom Savini's stuff, which was always a hell of a lot of fun. But then um, the writer, what's his name, had the rights to the Living Dead title.
Dan
Romero.
O'Banion, I think.
No, not Dan O'Bannon, but who wrote Night of the Living Dead? What's got
Oh, you're
my old? This is just old man brain farts here.
no, it's
But
John Russo.
we're John Russo, yeah. And I even read I read a paperback called Return of the Living Dead that he wrote in the early 80s. It had nothing to do with the movie that was made. It was about a
Huh.
school bus that got turned over in the rural area or something. But the point I'm making is when Dan O'Bannon got a hold of it, he basically did his own thing and it was the alternate sequel. So it wasn't the official sequel, it was the alternate sequel. And so I felt like I was doing the second sequel to the alternate sequel to the movie that changed, that was the beginning of modern horror, at least for my generation. And and so to a certain degree, that's like the 6 degrees of separation thing. It's
A
like,
little
hey,
bit.
I'm involved, I
It's like a
have
multiverse of
yeah, it
horror,
was like being connected somehow. But I think the movie did, and I tried to be, I tried to take into account both the Romero movie and Dan's movie because they're so different,
Yeah,
even to the
tonally for sure.
rules, even to the rules of, in O'Bannon, it's EC Comics, you can cut off a head and the body will run. Well, in Night of the Living Dead, you shoot the brain, you kill the ghoul. Boom. That's it. So there's certainly differences besides the tone of the whole thing. and certainly eating brains had nothing to do with, in George Romero's version, they were just
You
became
just eat
cannibals.
bodies. Yeah.
Because that was a horrible thing.
Yeah.
Also, if you really look at the movie Night of the Living Dead, nowhere does it doesn't say that it's where it came from. It might have come from a satellite that came down on the TV, I think they or radio, they said something like that. But my favorite um, origination concept was the campaign, the poster for Dawn of the Dead, which said, "When hell is full, the dead will walk the earth." Now that's my kind of a zombie movie,
Right.
because it gets right back to the Haitian zombies. I
That's
like the
true.
macabre part of it. Now in Night of the Living Dead, there was that satire and the comedy at the end where the sheriff and the good old boys are out popping zombies. I think that, I mean, Walking Dead's all about that.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's a soap
Zombie
opera
headshots.
about people where there's zombies to be shot. You know. But so anyway, I wanted to make it. I kind of was trying to go both ways with it, not truly, but and I didn't. I don't. I do generally. Reanimator, Society, and Bride of Reanimator. They're all pretty funny.
Yeah.
They're very funny. And yet, for some reason, when I did Return of the Living Dead 3, I didn't want to make it funny at all. And I think maybe because the second one didn't work funny.
Yeah.
And but I think also because I thought, well, Night of the Living Dead is kind of straight. It's not funny. It's, and actually I had my own ideas of what I wanted to do, especially based on Bride of Reanimator, because in Bride of Reanimator, the best character was only on screen for about 15 minutes. That's the bride. And
Right.
after, and I think, I don't know if it was that I didn't know what to do with her, or if I just didn't think that maybe that if I could pull it off, that character. And so when the movie was done, I looked at it, I said, my God, you spend an hour and a half movie and you give the best character 15 minutes. I thought I should do a movie based on that character, or similar. And so that was the idea, is to make the main character, a living dead, and to get into that aspect. Now it did have the punk element that Dan O'Bannon had, just not the fun part of it. The
Yeah.
funny,
Not the
fun,
not the
all
graveyard
that.
stripping,
I
but the
tried, I tried to do the zombies, the living dead, um, tried to be inspired by Tarman, and I mean that's a great character, But
yeah.
I didn't get there, but I tried with the guy that pulls his head out, and the guys coming out of the barrels, and you know some of those things. But so that was certainly coming from Return of the Living Dead. But I think Return of the Living Dead 3 just holds together. It's much more organic movie, more along the lines of Re-Animator than Bride of Re-Animator, because I think
Yeah.
it really is clear, the development. I think the characters all work. They're not funny. I mean, they don't have that irony that
Yeah.
Re-Animator has. I mean, Jeffrey Combs, from the very first time we see him, I mean,
He's chewing scenery.
you know what he's about. And Bruce Abbott just gives the whole heart to the movie. He's so sincere and believable as the guy who's being corrupted. And Meg is, I think their love story really works. And I think in Return of the Living Dead 3, the love story between Kurt and Julie, I think really works. You
Yeah.
know, yeah, they're different. They're not as pure. I think Dan and Meg and Re-Animator, they're a little bit more early 60s than
They're
early 80s.
sweethearts versus like
Well, I mean,
intimate.
I could never, I remember saying, I remember once, I think I told Barbara, I said, the whole problem with this whole thing is if you just would have moved in with them, None of this would have happened.
Right.
Would have had West as a roommate. He would have been a famous surgeon, and but it was also weird that it was like, one of the most anachronistic lines in the movie. It's like when he says, when they're saying, "What'd you do with the cat? And why'd you do that?" He says, "It's none of your business, just like it's none of mine that you're sleeping with the dean's
Right.
daughter." And you go, you could be get out of school on a morals charge. Talking about? Is this 1918? What are you talking about here?
Right.
But
I
I
mean,
even
it's
thought that when we were making it. I thought that I remember, and that's why they added the line of, I think when Meg says, "That's my dad, world's last living Puritan,"
yep.
because of that, because it was like, this is not a legit, in the 50s, this could have been a legitimate, dramatic kind of structure, but not 1985.
Yeah, we'd progressed past that at that point, and I think you worked with Stuart Gordon quite a bit. Obviously, you'd be working on a lot of films together. I noticed the Guyver, mask and poster behind you, which you're one of the first to bring a manga adaptation to live action to the U.S. And
That was the first. Okay, let's
yeah,
not let's
that
let's
was the
not
first.
pussyfoot around here.
Yeah,
First
no,
time, first time there was a American kind of a Hollywood, anime live action movie.
and it got a great 4K release. I think it was the last year from Unearthed Films. But when you think about the time you worked with Stewart, how do you think he would react to Re-Animator having its 40th anniversary, considering all the work you've done with him over the years and how well you got to know him?
I think he would have seen it as a recognition of his genius.
I'd agree with that.
I think, and and I must say, when we were making it, I always thought it was just going to be great. But of course, I was young, and that's what I thought about everything. I mean, most of the first movies I ever made, I thought they were just going to be the best thing in the world. And it was only later, after failure, that you start realizing maybe they're not. But I think Stewart, I think he would just feel satisfied. I think he would, I think he'd feel satisfied because really it just really represents his kind of storytelling. I mean, that's how he told stories on stage, and I think he brought that to the movies. But what a lot of people don't understand is that even though it was the first movie Stuart and I ever did, the first movie I made, first one he made, um, he had been working for like 12 years or more, 15 years as a professional theater director. He was the creative director of the Organic Theater, and he did stuff to shock people. The first time he ever got in the newspaper was when he was in college in Madison, Wisconsin, and this is during the hippie times, and he put on a a play in college of Peter Pan where all the actors were naked, and they arrested him, and then he was in the newspaper. And so I think that really made him feel great because at that time we were anti-establishment, the counterculture, against the man and all this kind of stuff. And the idea that he got to, you know, be on the front lines of that, I think, and shock people. And so he loved to shock people. And I think that's part of with Re-Animator. It was. I mean, when I met him, he had a pilot, like a 50-page pilot for a TV pilot of Re-Animator.
Huh.
Um, and and then when we decided to work together, I said, okay, if we develop it into a feature, I'm on board. Back then, there was cable, it was HBO, Cinemax, but really TV was ABC, NBC, CBS. It was family TV.
Yeah, network television only.
You're not getting too far out there. Not like today. And so I didn't have any desire to do television. For Christ's sakes, I wanted to make a horror movie, you know. I had advertised in Variety for a horror movie director wanted. You know, that's how I met Stuart. Um, I was into horror, and as Dennis Paoli, the writer, Stuart's old buddy that went to school, high school with him and college with him, in the organic theater his whole life, and wrote Re-Animator plus tons of other stuff that Stuart did. He said, you know, Stuart and I could have done anything, but you wanted to do horror.
Ah,
It's true. I didn't, all I wanted to do was horror. And Stuart was ready to, he liked horror, you know, he liked it, but what he really liked was shocking people. And so when I met him, I said, look, I'm paying for this. And I know that as a horror fan, I know I'm a horror fan. I've taken the horror fan test. I love all movies. I'm a cinephile. I love movies. Every genre of movie, I love the good ones. But with horror, I like the bad ones. I'll watch bad horror movies all night long and enjoy the hell out of them. That makes me a horror fan.
it's
I
true.
also know that the when I was getting into this, I was risking everything I had. That the thing I hated was when you get these horror movies. I don't care if they're cheap or not. I'm not talking, you know, back then the big horror movies were like The Exorcist or something like
Right.
that. All the horror movies, this is the 80s. Everything was VHS. They were real cheap. You know, it was John Carpenter and George Romero and, you know, Sam Raimi, all these cheap movies that were just great. But what I didn't like was when they try to make a horror movie and then pull their punches, thinking they were gonna maybe not be so, you know, in the ghetto. Because at that time, in this late 70s, early 80s, horror was just sort of one step above porno in terms
Right.
of genre. You had horror, porno, adventure, you know, and horror is where you got the gore and stuff like that until Rambo and all those movies started co-opting the gore, then they started doing that stuff too. But it was you know, when they would go soft with it, then you didn't have anything. You didn't have the horror fans. The horror fans would rather have a bad movie that gives some fun than a good movie that's trying to be respectable. And so I told Stuart, we're not respectable here. We're not doing that. What I want is I want, you know, sex and violence. I want
The
gore.
Roger Corman way.
Well, even I think even more than Corman. I
Yeah.
don't think he ever would have made a Re-Animator.
No,
Because
he definitely had a bit of a limit to that. But you know, I think you're right. I've always said that horror fans will watch 90 minutes of mediocrity for 15 or 10 minutes of greatness. And so as long as you deliver,
society.
yeah. Well, you know, I mean, listen, well, society has become, I have a very soft spot for society because every time I've seen it throughout my life, it's changed how I've interpreted it. You know, I first saw it when I was younger and I didn't really understand the social commentary. I just was really into the effects. Then you get older, like, oh, wow, I'm an adult now. I can understand what you're going for. And then I lived in LA for a long time and I'm like, oh, wow, I really see what you're going for now with the Beverly Hills critique. But, you know, I think that that's what, you know, you mentioned that the test of a horror fan is just they're willing to watch everything as opposed to cherry pick, you know, the best, the things that are out
And
there.
we'll even watch stuff that just, you know, real poorly done because it's just so crazy. You know,
Yeah, it's
it's
charming. You know, it's you're more endeared by the idea than you are. You know, of course, we all want to watch a great movie that is well made and all those things. But at the end of the day, you want to feel something. You want to be entertained. And the one thing we say when we write our reviews is, you know, no movie should not be entertaining, right? It should entertain you. And horror movies, by and large, have that.
well, there is a genre that gives lie to that. The art movie doesn't have to be entertaining. The art genre.
Has a
Sometimes,
different intention, right?
sometimes the art genre is about making you suffer through it.
Like a Gaspar Noé film. You know, it's not so much about entertainment about making you really feel something deep and deep down. But Brian, I just want to say first again, congratulations on all the success that Re-Animator has seen, and for your career as well. You are an absolute legend as far as I'm concerned. I think many are concerned. And I hope my last question for you is: any chances we might be getting Society on 4K at some point?
I think so.
Okay, I'll take
I
that, and
think
I'll,
that,
I'll
I think I think the idea with Bride is to ride on the the attention that Reanimator's getting. Reanimator deserves it 100%. It deserves. I think that it is a classic horror movie, no question. 40 years later, it still holds up. You know,
yeah,
you go see it in the theater. You know, if you go with people, especially, if you go with other people, and especially if you go with people who haven't seen it or show it to somebody, because what I noticed that most of the people that were there this Wednesday, they're all in their like late 30s, early 40s. They have kids and stuff. And all of them have heard of it. And I've known some of them since they were kids, my my kids saw Reanimator when they were 5 or 6 years old, because that's how stupid I was, right?
I'm
They
sure they
went
turned
on
out
the
okay.
sets, they watched all the movies. But a lot of them, if you're not a horror fan, you don't go see horror movies. You know what? Imagine, you know, everybody's heard of Texas Chainsaw. A lot of people haven't seen it.
It's true.
A
It's
lot
true.
of them, because they don't want to. They just sort of think, I get it. I know what that's supposed to be about, you know. And Reanimator's the same way. Kind of everybody's sort of heard of it. And but what's amazing is these non-horror fans just had a great time with all that crazy gore right in your face, but the whole tone of it was like going on a Ferris wheel or you know, crazy car or something. It's just really entertaining. So I think it really deserves that. It really deserves the push, and I think getting Bride to come out towards the end of that push will give Bride more attention. It'll make it. It'll ride on the in the wake, you know, and then a lot of way fewer people have seen Bride than Re-Animator, and I certainly know the flaws of Bride are right in my face. But I do think there's some really great stuff in it. There's stuff in Bride that I just love, and I think it's worth seeing. But I think Society maybe can stand on its own.
Well,
Doesn't need to come in. I know it's not as good a movie as Reanimator or something, but it certainly the third act, I don't think anybody's matched it yet.
oh no, I mean the
No,
shunting is a
it's come on, we're talking the biggest bodysuit you ever saw, the biggest monster rubber suit. It's got 12 people in it.
I mean, it's impressive, and again, I think the coattails, that Bride may be riding on this 4K. I'd love to see them do it with Beyond Reanimator as well. I mean,
Well, that's the thing. The problem with Beyond is I don't own it.
oh
It's owned by a Spanish company. I made it. I don't know if you know this. I made that in Spain. I had
yeah,
a
it's
whole
Film Max,
line of
right?
pictures. Fantastic Factory was my label there. I spent 7 years in Spain making that label, and Beyond Reanimator was the way to get the American companies to buy the movies we were made, because they would know that one. But I didn't own it, so I can't do anything. But they are trying to get it, and I hope I hope that we can do it, because I'll definitely be involved with the restoration and all that. And I know Beyond Reanimator hasn't really been seen by many people because of how it came out and everything. But I don't know. I've got a soft spot for it.
It's a
It
lot of fun.
definitely has its big weaknesses. Certainly some in the effects area, but I don't know, just the whole concept of the whole idea of Weston prison, and it's just kind of wacky and fun. I think it really, I don't know. It was all made in Spain, so except for me and Jeffrey, nobody knew what we were. I had to find guys in Spain and show them how to make effects. It was,
Wow.
but they did a good job. And so I hope
I
that would
agree.
come so they could put out the 3 pack. I
Yes.
want the 3 pack.
Nice, like a beautiful little sets next to each other. They can all line up nicely on a shelf. Well, and Brian, again, I just want to say thank you for this time. For anyone watching this, you can buy the Re-Animator 4K UHD that's out now. There's multiple versions. Now we have a Re-Animator on the way. So looking forward to more of these 4K releases. And of
And
course,
remind me the name of the podcast?
Macabre Daily.
Macabre Daily. Hope to
Yes.
be there soon again.
Yes. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks,
Hope to have you
Matt.
back.
It was fun.